Title 17 U.S. Code 512F provides penalties for the deliberate misrepresentation of copyright infringement. The owners and authors of this video, the Common Denominator, and the Paramystic Broadcast Channel are a nonprofit 501c3 exempt organization and believes in good faith that it constitutes educational fair use, as per Title 17 U.S.C. 107. Persons, agencies, attorneys, and or social media algorithms filing a false or frivolous Digital Millennium Copyright Act complaint may be subject to civil liability. Warning: the following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Accordingly, viewer discretion is advised.
Happy hump day. Last week's show was a bust. Had to remove it. It was horrible. The sound you couldn't hear. But as always, I pledge my allegiance to the constitutional sovereignty of the United States of America and to the republic for which the flag stands, one nation under Almighty God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Folks, I can't make this stuff up. I was listening to the news and someone said something I thought was really kind of cool. So familiarity can bring forth favorability. If coupled with authenticity, one can and will be victorious. Believe it or not, that's very true. And so we come here and the quote for the day. I've got to go with the quote for the day. It's kind of comical because well, it is. It's a cartoon, but it's true. Those who stand for nothing will fall for anything. Alexander Hamilton. My guest coming up shortly to talk about the Constitution with me, that's actually on his bio of his. Very interesting man, Tom Martz. But in the meantime, some food for thought. At a bank, you need an ID. The airport, you need an ID. The doctor, the pharmacy, the school, everything you need an ID for, except you don't need IDs for voting. What is wrong with that picture? You can't make this stuff up. No ID is required to vote in these 14 states. You don't have to have a photo ID whatsoever. Just bring in a piece of mail. And it's kind of disheartening when you think about it because I could grab anyone's mail at any time. But let's have a deeper dive into what they're talking about the most between abortion and guns. So here you go. Liberals scream, save the children from the guns, followed by abort them, mask them, jab them, distance them, medicate them, indoctrinate them, mutilate them, sexualize them, and of course, we pornography them, And so how much is a life worth? By law, a bank guard can carry a gun to protect his employer's money. But a parent can't be legally armed to protect her children from outside the home. I have to tell you, it's getting dangerous out there, folks. It really, truly is. But look at this picture now. Which one of these signs will prevent another tragedy? All weapons are prohibited on these premises or a staff heavily armed and trained. Any attempt to harm children will be met with deadly force. I've got to tell you, I think I'd like to have number 2. And talk about number 2, I think I'd like to have number 2 there too, on the right. You can't make this stuff up. This cartoon really kind of came out at me. So we're all in agreement. The First and Fourth Amendment shall protect the future digital technologies of cell phones, emails, and private messages. But the Second Amendment only refers to muskets. And if that is the case, if the Second Amendment only applies to muskets, are these the only medical tools we can now have? Health and safety policy here is for everyone's protection. You are required to use your common sense whenever necessary. If you have none, please leave. And so you need to question everything and do your own research. Believe nothing of what you hear and half of what you see. Many people believe the most frequently watched body part in 2021 was the hands, but in fact, it was the brains. This one just came to me, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am for it. I know deer season is here, and some of you may not have land to hunt on. So just look for farms with Harris Waltz signs and feel free to hunt there. They support open borders, and you are just trying to feed your family and have a better life. But you're able to identify the terrorists. You're thinning out the herd. If you're lucky, it's 100 acres of land. And if it's 100 acres of land with a bobcat or a backhoe, you can bury a lot of stuff out there. Double down, pig farm, that's the trifecta of it all. But, on this particular picture, it's written, for those of you visiting from the future in the year 2024, we had to resort to comedy podcasts for unbiased news because the mainstream media couldn't be trusted. And then right below it, it's CNN is crying news network and MSNBC is Mrs. nasty, bald chicks at the MSNBC. I can't make this up. If you're going to vote, you may as well just go to the latrine, really, if you want to vote for Harris. It's just going downhill. But seriously, folks, this is some true stuff. Harris's accomplishments are here. They say she allowed 15 million unvetted illegals into the country. Believe it or not, it's way up higher than that. Closer probably to 50 million. Historic inflation crisis, huge gas prices in all the 50 states, record high consumer debt. You're looking at released terrorists into the country. In fact, we have 450,000 criminals that we know of in this state right now. 600 are with a Venezuelan gang. 600 are with the Trendaragua. Anyway, 600 of them we know that are here. I mean, this country is getting dangerous, folks. We're looking at the Russian-Ukraine war here. Russia right now is talking to North Korea. Can't make this up. North Korea to ask for more troops, 11,000 to be exact right now. They're working out a deal. You see what Israeli has done in the Hamas war. They have desecrated the highest echelon. We'll close with that one soon enough. But they say here it's a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, but the truth of the matter is it was a surrender. Violent crimes are skyrocketing. Try to jail a political rival in the name of democracy. First, we're a republic, not a democracy. They've lied to the American people about Joe's decline. We know that man never should have taken office. It was right out of the gate, elderly abuse, when Dr. Jill even had him, quote, run to represent the country. She knew right away. That was just absolutely horrible. There's a place for her. But they declared war on American energy, our oil, our fracking. We don't know where Kamala is on that. She goes up and down. They have record low test scores for K through 12 students. Folks, in the state of Missouri, if you can get a child at a 40% MAP score, that's doing good. Our school in Cameron, Missouri, is going for 42 to 43%. I don't know if you know this, but about 15, 20 years ago, you had a scale from 0, to 100%. They're at 40%. Think about that one. Most unpopular president / VP in history. The highest bankruptcy since 2010. Highest credit card debt. Mortgage rates are 100% up for rent. Out of control inflation. In fact, when she signed the Inflation Reduction Act, had nothing really to do with inflation, had more to do with climate agenda. Out of control inflation we've got. Trump was at 1.4%. They took office right now. We're creeping, I believe, and somewhere in about the 8%. And we have sent well over 150 billion. 150 billion to Ukraine. And the agenda is to support sex change. Let's not forget also the money they've sent to Iran. But these are the headline news right now. Democrats are fearing the race may be slipping away from Harris. The clock is ticking on Kamala Harris. That's from Politico, The Hill. Early voting could signal serious danger for Harris in Nevada. Longtime reporter says. Telegraph, there are ominous signs that Harris' blue wall is collapsing, and Harris has 2 weeks to turn it around. But I can't say anything other than this. She brings out the superstars. She brings out all of the, quote, Hollywood celebrities, rock and rollers, rap stars, all 9 yards. If you've been paying attention, Beyonce, Lizzo, Stevie Wonder. Now, I like Stevie Wonder. I will say that. I favor him. The rest of them, not so much. But they doubled down today, believe it or not, or was it yesterday? Eminem, XXX rated music. And boy, does that guy have a special place in my life. But, they want to make fun, believe it or not. They want to make fun of Donald Trump, who is literally, this is like almost a Norman Rockwell painting, Andy Warhol. You can see the vibrant colors. This is like, Trump has really put out some great natural pictures. Nothing that he's had to, quote, pose for. It just happens. He gets shot in the head and he's yelling, fight, 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 2 minutes later. Now, we look at the TikTok videos on views. Trump was over 300 million views in the United States. Okay, 300. I don't know what happened back here in late July, early August. I think that might have been the start of her campaigning. I don't know what she did, but apparently she had something going on. Maybe it was waltz strip dancing or something. But seriously speaking, we are at some very, very, very odd times. This is a most crucial, electrifying. I mean it. You've got to vote like your life depends on it. It really does. And by the way, this goes out to shout out to little Julie Ringer. She's the admin on Under the Bus and on Facebook there. And I really liked her. Had her on last week. Look forward to having more of her on, no doubt. So, folks, I'm going to close this up right now. And, of course, I have to say, last but not least, I didn't really mention the, quote, dunce in a room. But this knucklehead, believe it or not, did not shoot a firearm off when he was dressed for hunting. He looked like, believe it or not, Elmer Fudd. He didn't have the pointed hat on there, but he looked like Elmer Fudd, and he could not. And he not only could he not load up the shotgun, but he ended up not even shooting it once. And you know, folks, losing toxic people is a victory. Think about that. Look at the people around you in your life. If you know someone's toxic, and you know who they are, there's just absolutely no doubt about it. You know who they are. And, you know, this is really what's going to happen to all these leaders. And this is some of the leaders that we even have possibly in our country for treason. But you've got to take out the main cancer. And right now we taking out, Israel's taking out everything with Hamas and the Hezbollah leaders. And I've got to tell you, they've done a fantastic job in really, and they do have a democracy there, but they're because they're learning. But, you know, truth be told, they've really done a great piece there. I want to share one last piece. This is a fact check piece, and I don't often get to do these, and it's only about 2.5 minutes long. So we're going to turn around and see if we can get this on here. Oh, come on. I'm going to say it's this one here. And let's see if I can share it. Come on down here. Nope, that's the wrong one for sure. Nope, don't want to do that. This, of course, is pertaining to the voting no, by the way, on voting no on, gosh darn it, Vincent. Voting no on the ballot for number 3 here in Missouri. We're definitely not wanting to, quote, turn this state into a state where we get government funding for all the nasties that they're doing. Let's see if this is it. Please let it be it. Yes, it is. So, folks, let me bring this back over to you. Get this introduced. This, you ought to realize, is fact, okay? So this is not made up by me or anyone else. This is, what did I do? Oh, here we go.
Rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And
no, I'm talking about your bill. How late in the 3rd trimester could a physician perform an abortion if he indicated it would impair the mental health of the woman?
So, I mean, through the 3rd trimester. The 3rd trimester goes all the way up to 40 weeks.
Okay, but to the end of the 3rd trimester?
Yep, I don't think we have a limit in the bill.
Where it's obvious that a woman is about to give birth. She has physical signs that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating. I'm asking if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
People calling here. How can I help you?
I'm looking to have an abortion.
How far along are you?
I'm 34 right now.
An abortion at any stage is actually much safer than delivering a term pregnancy. It's a 4 to 5 day procedure. The needle is inserted through the abdomen and into the fetal heart where lidocaine is injected, and that will completely numb the fetus so there's no pain. And then after that, we inject a medication called digoxin and another medication called KCL into the fetal heart, which will slow and then stop the fetal heartbeat. And then we'll assist you in sort of pushing in the induction and then remove all of the products of conception. We specialize in later trimester care. Our doctor is very well versed in what he's doing and he's very good.
So I'm not like a rare situation. Y'all help women this late in pregnancy all the time?
All the time.
rightly mentioned.
I can't make this up. They are okay with murdering children that late into a pregnancy. I've got to tell you, that really caught my attention. And with that being said, I think it's time for me to say, hey, that was the final for the moment, the last thought. And you've got it. You've got it right there. She's lying. They're lying, amongst so many other things. But that right there says it all. But think about this and let us know what you're thinking about over in the column there. In the meantime, how are you, Tom?
I'm good. How about you?
Brother, I'll tell you what. Things are speedballing.
Was not to get off the subject, but was your attorney able to reach out to the I4J folks?
Not. I have not even spoken to him. I'm giving him the time. I mean, I've had a few people that have told me, Vince, your case is complex. Let him work on it. When he's ready, he's going to call you. And I'm hoping by the end of October will be my October surprise. I really do. And I think it's and thank you, by the way, because I think it's very nice that you would think kind enough to say, Vincent, this firm or this group of people or organization might be able to help you in your case. You're very well versed in everything I've had to go through personally. So I know you wanted to do basically a good bit show about the 27 amendments of the Constitution. I've done a little digging.
No. The state amendments that are going to be on the ballot in the Missouri.
Oh my goodness. I am complete. You know what? I'm good to go with this then. Okay. I'm good to go with this. 27, I had one-liners. I had just sentences. Really good, keeping it short. I knew you could jump into it and make them deeper. So you take over from here then. I mean, you definitely have more. I looked at your resume. Impressive.
Well, man, I looked at what you have on me as well, and I'm thinking, where did you get some of that stuff?
Well, I actually found it online in the Wikipedia on you.
I didn't know I had a Wikipedia.
Yes, you do. Yeah, if you look up your name, it gives your family, your address, it gives everything. But yeah, of course, I'm hoping it would be an old address. But it said that you were born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I know you and I always had a good laugh about the fact that we're both Pennsylvanians.
Yeah,
and here we are in Missouri.
The best thing about Baltimore, Maryland is that I and Mike Rowe were born there.
Really?
Yeah.
Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs?
Yeah.
I like him. Plus his Christmas song was pretty good too. Got to give credit where it's due. The man's pretty talented, you know.
Yeah, he's a whole lot more famous than I am, and his Wikipedia page is probably a whole lot more in depth and deeper than mine.
Well, you know, the thing is, you've actually been in politics. You've held offices. You're obviously a very bright man. Treasury wise, I was kind of very shocked on that side of it. I will say that. I didn't see you being a numbers kind of guy.
Yeah, but my one fallback is I'm not team red and I'm not team blue. People tell me I need to get on one bus or the other, and I'm on team liberty, and I don't like team tyranny. And I fear that's what you get when you vote nothing but Republican and Democrat.
And you know, you did it so well. It's not a Republican or Democratic thing. It's not a red or a blue kind of thing. At this point right now, it is liberty over tyranny. And I also try to say it's the lesser of two evils you have to choose, because that's all we have at this point. And if Donald Trump is considered the lesser of the two evils, I'll take him. I'll take that evil. But there you go.
I had to turn the light on. Since you made me wipe out my blinds to eliminate the aura that I had. of the
Yeah, well,
celestial
yeah,
kingdom behind me.
yeah, you look like you had a halo going on. I didn't want you looking too saintly.
Hey, have you actually looked at the constitutional amendments that they're looking to put into the state constitution?
I did look at 6 of them. And unfortunately, I even printed them out onto the Facebook page of the common denominator, and you still can't read it. And I'm really upset about that, I will say.
Well,
But go ahead.
what I find funny is there's a commercial on the radio that talks about, and this is in favor of Amendment 2, that's the one for sports gambling. They go on to discuss that 38 states have given permission to the people so they can gamble online. And of those 38, I think 6 of them are around and have a state border with Missouri, which got me to thinking. I saw your Alexander Hamilton quote, which I must have it somewhere, but he is my least liked founding father of them all, because he pretty much was in favor of the government that we have now. He was more of a person who wanted a all-powerful national government so it would step on the rights, the privileges of the people and of the, at that point in time, 13 republics, which were supposed to be sovereign. And he was actually in favor of a huge government. And when you've got commercials telling you that these 38 states have granted permission, it just drives me nuts. Because Patrick Henry and Samuel Adams and all those founding fathers would be, if they were here, they'd be going, the state grants you permission to do what?
Yes.
And it just blows me away. Now, I'm a no on all these constitutional amendment questions.
Straight down the line?
Yeah, straight down the line.
Okay.
2, they talk about how it is that, and I'm going to go to the actual ballot language. It talks about how the annual revenues received from the tax that is being appropriated for institutions of elementary, secondary, and higher education in this state, provided, however, that an appropriation to such educational institutions shall be made only after such annual wagering tax revenues are appropriated as follows. So the first appropriation is to reimburse the reasonable expenses incurred by the commission to regulate sports wagering in the state, to the extent that the commission has not been fully reimbursed for such expenses from the sports wagering fees collected by the state, and the greater of 10% of such annual tax revenues, or $5 million, to go into the compulsive gaming fund, because we're creating a commission to help people if they get addicted to gambling, which is being, if this passes, you'll now be allowed to gamble in the state of Missouri. But we're creating a commission that will help you get unaddicted from your gaming addiction, should you get addicted to gaming. And all that's paid for through, I mean, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're gambling, you're losing money, you get addicted, you continue to lose money. So they take the money that you've lost to help you to get away from your gambling addiction.
Correct. And it's just a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle. So how much of that money is actually left over to go to education?
Well, there is a commercial where I think it's Ozzie Smith from the St. Louis Cardinals is talking about how there's an ironclad guarantee that the money goes to education. Well, it's appropriated to DESE. Kind of like the lottery earnings were also appropriated to DESE. What DESE does with that money is a different story. So when they talk about this ironclad constitutional guarantee that the money will go to fund education, no, it's it's an ironclad guarantee that it'll go to fund the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, but that is a bureaucracy that is in charge of or given the authority over the entire schooling of the state of Missouri. How they appropriate that money is their prerogative. There's nothing ironclad that says education, as in the schools, are going to get, let's say, 90% of the revenues that are generated by this new gaming tax. But the fact that that we're getting ready to approve something and put it in the state constitution simply to create a legal framework, when in reality, there's nothing right now that prevents you from online gaming within state statute that I can find. The only thing that's preventing it from occurring is because the companies that do it won't allow Missouri residents to do it, because if you try to log in to a gaming platform in the state of Missouri, it'll kick you out. But if you drive over to Illinois and you log in to a gaming platform, you can place a bet, drive back over to Missouri, and you're good to go.
Well, Julie here says if the Department of Education is gone, just think of how much control the government will have. I don't know. Would it increase government control within the state or less? Lessen it?
In reality, the local school boards are supposed to have the control of the education within the political subdivisions of which they're located. See, each school district is its own political subdivision. And it is the school board who's in charge of that. The superintendent actually works for the school board, not the other way around. But sadly, since I guess about 1950, the people have been voting people onto school boards who believe that their job is to do whatever it is that the school superintendent wants to do, instead of them telling the school superintendent, this is what we want, this is what's going to happen. The parents of this school district put us in charge of the governing of this school district, and this is the way it's going to function.
And you see, it's I know I can relate to exactly what you're saying, because here in Cameron, the school district, for instance, he is a tyrant. That's the quack, Matt Robinson, Dr. Matt Robinson. I call him a quack. He's overpaid. He's given a $17,000 raise when the GPAs of the students have been declining since he actually started working there 14 years ago. His salary has increased. The GPA has gone down. The board can remove him if they elect to do so. But I have to tell you, they are just so reliant on him. And so the few people of the community that are stepping forward to challenge policies of Modesi and the district, I mean, we've got the bear in the trap. We just can't seem to kill the darn thing.
Well, on election day, I get the opportunity to travel over to Cape Girardeau because I'm giving a talk on swearing an oath. And what I have determined after years and years and years and years in research, and I'm going to put myself in this same boat. Back in 1980, I swore an oath to Uncle Sam when I enlisted. I had no clue what that oath was, what it was for, what it meant. But the more I have educated myself, the more I've come to the realization that almost 100% of the people that swear an oath have not a clue what that oath is for, why they take it, or what the ramifications are if you don't follow through with it. Because the government, in reality, I shouldn't say the government, because the government's made up of individuals. So anytime somebody says the government, they've got to they've got to look at this as the government is made up of individual people. So you do have individual people who are tyrants. They generally get into government employ because they want to take advantage. They want to be the dictator. They want to be the one who tells you what you can and cannot do. But that is not what their official capacity is if they were to follow the oath that says that they are to defend and support the Constitution. I just happened when I did it. I swore an oath that I was going to defend the Constitution with my life. And after 4 years of getting out with an honorable discharge, I realized how much of a failure I was. Because all foreign enemies and domestic, there's more domestic enemies than there are foreign any day of the week. Even when I was in back in the 80s.
You know, I don't, my heart doesn't want to believe what you're saying, but my mind says, I agree with you 99.9%. I do. You don't want to think that you've got people out there that are so misinformed, disinformed, ill-informed, people that just follow the masses of, again, this propaganda machine that we have in mass media. I don't care what anyone says. I believe a lot of the podcasts that I seem to connect with or watch, I don't hear many of them saying things like, hey, let's create a nuclear bomb, you know. But you look down the streets of a lot of these protests, and they're supposed to be peaceful while cars are burning, buildings are burning, assaults, rapes, murders. I don't understand this. So I do believe that we've got more people here domestically that would go over the edge, Lulu crazy. I don't know.
Well, look at the riots and look at what occurred the day of Trump's inauguration back in 2016 that conveniently was forgotten by pretty much all the legacy media sources. And it was pretty much also forgotten by many people who carry that red flag around with them. But on that day, there were people who were going into his after election party or whatever it's called that were getting urine thrown on them. There was a limo that famously was broken into and burned out on a city street. There was bank windows that were busted out. And we're supposed to believe that January the 6th was an insurrection, but yet all this other stuff occurred, and that's just the way that we're supposed to act.
Well, you do know that this in 13 days, the booths will be closed, hopefully in 14. I doubt that. I mean, some of these states seem to go as long as 4, 5, 6 days after the election to get the count right. I don't understand that at all. At least in the 2020 election, it was like that. And there are different ways. They've really mastered what I call election interference for sure. The Democratic Party. There's no way anyone can tell me that the 2020 election, straight up and down, was a fair election. I won't believe that. I simply won't believe that.
Well,
but they actually have a new way of, they actually have other ways that they're working on, believe it or not.
When you, prior to the election, already forecast some of the things that are going to occur, and I think it was in Atlanta, where they discussed that they could end up, because they had a plumbing issue. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't have it when they were discussing it, or else they would have fixed it. Or they decided to delay until the night of the election, and then all of a sudden, oh, we have a plumbing issue. We got to stop counting the ballots. I mean, I was on locally here on KSGF. We were doing an election night show, Nick Reed and I, and we closed up shop at 11:30. And Trump was so far ahead, it wasn't even funny, because all these states were going to stop counting ballots and they were going to continue the following day. But in reality, when I woke up at, 4 o'clock the following morning, all of a sudden Biden went from being defeated to all of a sudden being victorious. And I don't care whether you have a red flag or a blue flag. If you can't look at that in a manner to go, okay, how exactly did that occur? Then you possibly probably shouldn't be voting, but that's a different amendment.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I watched videos out of Georgia. The judges are gone. That'd be the judges of the Democrat side, judges on the Republican side. They're gone.
Right.
And they're pulling out file after tote after tote after tote. And they're sitting there putting these ballots through. I don't see how that got away unanswered.
Because, and I know you may not like my answer, but once that vote is counted and it's in the system, there's no removing it. There's no, how do you know what was in that box? And when they scanned them or counted them, there's no physical manner in which I can figure out where that vote can be removed from the tally. Now, they should have never been counted anyway.
Right. But the thing is, if you had a timestamp, for instance, and everything that happened from 10:30 at night till 3 o'clock in the morning should be considered null and void.
Okay, but you have to remove those paper ballots from the system. Because if there is a recount, what are you going to recount? Because they don't timestamp that ballot. You can effectively remove the electronic trail. You can't remove the paper trail. The paper trail's there. And you know darn well, based on Al v. Gore, or Bush v. Gore, excuse me, from Florida, they will continue to try to count every single ballot, no matter what, over and over and over and over again. And as soon as you make it so that we're not going to count these because of this, now all of a sudden you're stealing the people's vote. But I would expect that, considering that the governor, or not the governor, the Secretary of State of the state of Georgia would do a better job of overseeing their elections, not our elections. But in discussing the position of Secretary of State, we have Amendment 3 on our ballot. And you just did something, you had a little before I came on, but this is the beginning language of this constitutional amendment. This section shall be known as the Right to Reproductive Freedom Initiative. The government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom, which is the right to make and carry out decisions about all matters relating to reproductive health care, including but not limited to prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, birth control, abortion care, miscarriage care, and respectful birthing conditions. So as worded, as soon as Amendment 3 passes, every single safeguard that is currently in law is eliminated.
Will be removed.
And the not limited to opens it up into other things that do not relate to an abortion, or else the not limited to wouldn't be in there. Because I also like how in the amendment it talks about persons who are being pregnant, not women. Now, you and I both know that only women can get pregnant.
Last I knew, yes.
But for some reason, they use the term person in this amendment. The government shall not deny or infringe upon a person's fundamental right to reproductive freedom. No matter what Tim Waltz thinks, men can't have periods. No, she's probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just don't understand why we want to go backwards. You and I have had this discussion. We usually say another law passed is another right taken away. And in this case, if they were to pass this, that means the sky's the limit on whatever they want to do. If they want to vote yes on 3.
Yeah, if they vote yes on 3 based on the wording and the way it is worded, as soon as Amendment 3 passes and is certified, then every safeguard, whether it's protecting the woman who's having the abortion, whether it's protecting the child who is in the womb, is completely gone. I literally could start performing abortions, and I don't know a darn thing about them. And with the way the amendment reads, there's not a darn thing they could do about it. You literally are going back to the point, the Democrats, well, do you want to go back to the point where they're using coat hangers in a back alley? If the Amendment 3 passes the way it's worded, that's exactly what they are doing. And then there is a commercial that I've heard where there's this doctor up in St. Louis. She is not an OBGYN. She's just some sort of a doctor. I don't know what type. She talks about how with the current statutes and that are in Missouri, women are bleeding out because they can't have an abortion. But if you read the only state statute that is in existence, it discusses how it is that the doctors can perform an abortion under emergency circumstances. Who determines that? It's not the government, it's the doctor. If it's medically necessary, it's medically necessary. So what doctors are doing now is they're basically washing their hands going, well, I don't know. I could be convicted of murder if I go ahead and perform this abortion. So you're going to have to go to Kansas, or you're going to have to go to Texas, or you're going to have to go to Louisiana. You're going to have to go to some state that allows that to be performed. But it specifically states in the state statute, under a medical emergency, the doctor can make that decision to do whatever is medically necessary to save the life of the mother. So we've been, the propaganda on this whole amendment it's freaking extreme.
It is. And the thing is, when you take into consideration, and this was a point that a friend of mine and I were discussing, when you think about rape, incest, molestation, basically an unwanted child through those events, you still have a term. You still should have like a trifecta. I mean, a trimester, the first, the second, or the third. I don't believe you go all the way to the third and then say, guess what? I don't want to have the child because I was raped. And the other thing is, you never know, because they don't keep a record of the individual that says, well, I was raped and that's the reason why I want to get rid of the child. Well, who raped you? There's no police report. There's no identifiable sperm donor in that case. So you're only looking at 1.67% of abortions that are through rape, molestation, incest, and then the second category, of course, is a mother's life is compromised. If it's 1.67, the rest of it is nothing but birth control, willful birth control.
Well, I think in all sincerity, that is what it has been predominantly used for. It was also, in reality, it was used as a mechanism to hold down the population of blacks. Most of your Planned Parenthoods are in predominantly minority areas. The Margaret Sanger was she was basically Hitler's right-hand man. Hitler was the Jews, and Margaret Sanger pretty much was the blacks. And yet a huge percentage of those people just can't seem to get off that plantation and vote in a manner that's would be deemed appropriate for them. For some reason, they just seem to, well, if the master says I have to vote this way, then that's the way I'm going to vote. Because this amendment also goes on to talk about how it says no person shall be penalized, prosecuted, or otherwise subjected to adverse action based on their actual, potential, perceived, or alleged pregnancy outcomes, including but not limited to miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion. Nor shall any person assisting a person in exercising their right to reproductive freedom with that person's consent be penalized, prosecuted, or otherwise subjected to adverse action for doing so. And this also includes mental health. So if you can actually convince your pregnant girlfriend, if you kick her in the stomach and cause her an abortion, and as long as she says, well, I'm okay with that, well, you as an individual, the only thing that you're really not guilty of anything unless she decides to press assault charges on you. But part of the issue too is we've got two different definitions for what life is. If you're in an auto accident and you kill a woman, whether intentionally or accidentally, who is pregnant, you are charged with two crimes: the life of the mother and the life of the unborn. But yet, in other parts of the law, you can get rid of the unborn because it's not considered a life at that point. So which is it? You're either going to define it one way as life, or you're going to define it the other way, that it's not life. And then you end up with the probability of, hey, at 8 months, 27 days, 13 hours, this woman up and decides that she mentally cannot handle being a mother. So whammo chango, she goes and have an abortion. And I've actually listened to a doctor. I'll have to send you the link. But there's a doctor who used to be an abortion doctor who describes in great detail the abortion and how it's performed, and how they have to extract all the parts of the fetus. They got to make sure that they have 2 legs. They got to make sure that they have 2 arms. They got to make sure that they have an abdomen. They got to make sure that they have a head, just to make sure that there's no probability of infection after this occurs. And no, I'm not a woman. I can't get pregnant. But at some point, life is either life or it's not life. And Amendment 3 is just basically making the case that life really isn't life until the mother determines that it is life. And I guess that's after the child comes out of the womb.
Right. I find it to be a very difficult. I personally can't see how anyone could go past a set time period, i.e., again, the first trimester, make up your mind, and maybe possibly offer the child up for adoption. There are many, many people. But I think, with the trafficking of children now in the United States, and we are the number 1 in the world. In fact, Walt Disney just had another big sex ring busted just literally within the past week. A huge sex ring. Again, another group of people working at Disney doing this stuff under the very noses of the families that are visiting and spending money there. Let me ask you this: the amendment number 5 is the next one, correct?
Yes.
And what exactly? Now that has to do with the gaming again. What are your thoughts?
That has to do with a gaming establishment or a gaming boat that will be on the Osage River. Currently, in the state constitution, there was a cap put on gaming boats. It all started that, back when Mark Twain, the gambling boats going up and down the Mississippi River. So they basically allowed the application of a gaming boat. Don't even know if there was any state regulations at that point. It occurred. Then in, I forget what year, the Constitution was one of these constitutional conventions in the state. It was created that there could only be either 10 or 11 gambling establishments on a river, or a gambling boat on a river. The problem is some of these gaming establishments aren't boats at all. They're buildings. But because you can see the Mississippi River, that makes you a gambling boat. And they've created this essence where within the wording of the amendment or within state law, they've created this dichotomy where you can build something like, I think it's in Cape Girardeau, where they built the gaming casino, and then they had to trench over toward the building to get the water close enough to call it a gaming boat.
And we have several, we've got several of them in Kansas City.
Correct.
Ameristar is one of them. Flamingo is another. Harris is another. And all they have to do is just have water piped in from the river, go underneath the building, and go out the other side. And that's considered a riverboat.
Yeah, and pretty much this one that's they're trying to get at Lake of the Ozark, it appears by the reading of the amendment, this specific carve-out seems to be either for one person who is already predetermined, and it makes it so that this individual or group of individuals will be the only ship allowed. The federal government, according to, I think there was I forget which Supreme Court opinion it was, but one of the rights that was listed by the judicial branch was the traveling upon the navigable waterways and businesses on the navigable waterways of the United States. Well, here we have a navigable waterway that the state legislature, or actually I take that back, it wasn't the state legislature, it was the initiative petition process. All three of the amendments that we've discussed already are the petition process. Now I'm going to get back to 3 momentarily too, but on 5, the signatures were gathered. So the whole entire state has to change the Constitution to allow one more gaming facility at Lake of the Ozarks. The people at Lake of the Ozarks don't seem to want this. But all of the text that I'm getting into my phone for all these different amendments, it's kind of odd that all these groups that are supporting all these different amendments, none of them actually are headquartered in the state of Missouri. Really? I've got like several in my phone that the organization who's sending me a vote yes on amendment such and such and such and such, they're headquartered in Virginia. It's some sort of a PAC that is trying to make the attempt to get the voters to pass something in the state of Missouri that maybe the voters don't want. But if you're going to, if that judicial system is correct, and you have the right to earn a business on the navigable waterways, and you want to create a gaming boat or something on the Osage River, shouldn't that just be open? If there's 5, 6, 7, 8, it's survival of the fittest. One of those boats or two of those boats will be highly successful. The others will fail. They'll go out of business. They won't be there any longer. But this amendment seems to be specific to one individual or individuals in a group to make it so that there is a gaming boat up in Lake of the Ozarks, and it has to be within, I believe it's 100 feet of the 500-year floodplain as developed by FEMA.
What?
Yeah, it's notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, in addition to such licenses as have been authorized prior to January 1 of 2024, the Missouri Gaming Commission shall issue one additional excursion gaming boat license. Such license shall only be issued to an excursion gambling boat that will operate upon the portion of the Osage River from the Missouri River to the Bagnell Dam. Then it goes on to state, notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, lotteries, gift enterprises, and games of chance may be conducted on excursion gambling boats and floating facilities licensed by the Missouri Gaming Commission upon the portion of the Osage River from the Missouri River to the Bagnell Dam, which shall include artificial spaces that contain water that are within 500 feet of the 100-year base flood elevation as established by FEMA.
Wow. I'm interested in knowing the group or the individual. I know Kansas, I believe, let me rephrase that. I believe Minnesota, Kansas, Oklahoma, the gambling goes through the Native American indigenous people
Correct.
of those states.
Because they're
And I'm
seen
not
as
sure.
sovereign.
What's that, sir?
Because they're seen as sovereign.
Okay. And so those states, and I remember a story I was told probably about almost 30 years ago. Shakopee, Minnesota, for instance, had a land auction, fire sale, foreclosures, blah, blah, blah. And in doing so, they ended up, the highest bidder, of course, is going to get the property. Well, I want to say it was the Majibis or Majibwa tribe up in Minnesota in that area that were buying up like property after property after property. They had the money. And then finally, after, I'm going to say a dozen to 15, 18 properties were sold, and it all went to the Ojibwe Indian tribe, nation of people. The city shut down, Shakopee shut down any further sales for the evening. They just said, that's it, we're shutting it down. And I remember the quote from one of the Native American tribal leaders, a chief, I believe, but it was a quote just the same from a well-informed tribal member, which was, Shakopee just gave us the bootstraps to pull the boots up on our foot, and then by them shutting down that meeting and not allowing us to continue purchasing all the way through, they took our boots back off our feet. So I'm interested in knowing what entity, because this obviously is about one facility. This Amendment 5, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's about one facility only.
Yeah, and I'll text you what I have had provided to me on who it is that they believe will be the one who is granted to the license. But if I could, let's get back to Amendment 3 just for 1 second.
Most definitely.
Amendment 3 was the abortion one. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe if the Secretary of State, who is the individual who is supposed to certify the language and the ballot proposals would have done his job, then I don't think Amendment 3 would have been on the ballot. Because it is the Secretary of State's job, as by his oath, that the signatures gathered were done in compliance with the Constitution and state law. And state law specifically says that if you are going to put something in the Constitution, you have to also, within all the documentation of the paperwork, when you're gathering signatures, you have to let it be known which laws are going to be usurped by said constitutional amendment. The people who were getting the signatures on Amendment 3 did not do that. So you literally were unaware that this constitutional amendment was eliminating all the laws that right now protect women from a botched abortion.
From butchery.
Yeah. So the Secretary of State, who, for a lack of a better term, I have to say he doesn't know what his job was, or he was not in keeping with his job, approved Amendment 3 to go on the ballot. It was litigated by a few individuals here in the state of Missouri. Justice Limbaugh, yes, relative of Rush, determined that the Secretary of State failed in his obligation to not certify Amendment 3. So he specifically said that until this is looked at, Amendment 3 will not be on the ballot because it did not follow the Constitution, nor did it follow the law in making it so that the people understood what it was that they were signing. In a 4-3 opinion by the Supreme Court here in the state of Missouri, they determined that they get to ignore whatever laws are on the books. They also get to ignore the parts of the Constitution that they do not like, and they allowed Amendment 3 to go on the ballot to begin anyway. So it tells me that there's at least 4 justices on our Supreme Court that, because I think there's 7, I think it was 4-3. There are 4 that have determined that if the Constitution says one thing, and then there are state laws that make it so that this is what needs to occur before you go do this, they can completely ignore those and insert their own opinion to become law. Kind of like the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania did in 2020 because of COVID, when they usurped Pennsylvania state laws, created their own laws, and then they attempted to make the case that, well, no, this is the way it is because we wear the black robe. Well, they're
Correct.
not legislators. They're not part of the legislative branch. You don't get to say something is not within keeping of the Constitution, then create your own set of laws and say, this is what we're going to follow.
You know, you're absolutely correct. I was looking, and you and I, when we do have conversations on the phone, I think you would agree, we could go an hour and a half, 2 hours, no problem. No problem. But something, I was talking to a friend of mine in Kansas on Sunday. She says to me, Vincent, there are 20 judges up for re-election or up for election in different, areas of the state. Blah, 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 blah. She said 5 are Republicans, 15 are Democrats, and we need to look at that. Not only, we've got to get the message out there to the people. This judge is a Democrat. And chances are the 4 that you are speaking of that finally had that opinion to say, hey, of the state of Missouri, to say, hey, 3 is good to go. I guarantee you they've got to be of the mindset of the Democrat.
See, we have in the state of Missouri, we have two separate systems. We got the Missouri Plan, which is how it is that our Supreme Court is determined. It's also the way that some counties appoint their judges, to where the bar and supposedly 3 lay individuals and I think the Supreme Court Justice of the state of Missouri will go through the lawyers who have requested to be a nominee for a judicial position will put forth their resume. Then it's up to these 7 individuals, I believe it is, to look through all of these people who wanted to be a judge, pick out 3, and then send them to the governor. Then the governor chooses one of those, if I'm not mistaken, and then with the advice and the consent of the Senate, then that individual is approved. And then after serving a year on the bench, the people get to vote to retain that individual to have his seat on the bench. Now, I don't like that system. But I also don't like the system where judges have to run as Republicans and Democrats. Because if a judge is supposed to not be biased, the fact that you have to, in order to run, put either an R or a D at the end of your name to run for a political office at this point, you've lost any type of, through the eyes of the electorate, you have lost any type of, I am not biased in the judicial opinions that I will give. Now,
Correct.
I don't know if there's a system that has been created or will be created that will end that. The only thing I can think of is judges put their name on a ballot. There's no political party. There's no nothing. It's kind of like you're running for city council. But if they're going to do that, then you've got to make it so that the people, the nerds like me, I want to be able to read the opinions that you have offered on cases. I want to be able to read the case. I also want to be able to read the opinion. I don't want you telling me, well, so-and-so did this, and then this is the way I opined. Because you literally, as we have come to reason, propaganda fills the airwaves.
Correct.
Propaganda fills the media. There are very few people who I, on a regular basis, will reach out to read something because I know it's slanted one way or the other. It's incredibly difficult, and I forget what the service used to be, but there used to be a media source that you could get. They wrote the same article from 2 different political directives. The same article would be written from the Democrat side, and the article would be written in the Republican side. So it was interesting to see how it is as you compare the two, how the journalist was capable, because it was written by the same individual in some of the ones that I read, how the journalist was able to interject certain terms within this journalism piece so you knew that this is a story that is more apt to be followed by Democrats, or it was a story that was more apt to be followed by Republicans. I mean, I used to love listening to Matt Taibbi and reading Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald back when they were considered liberal. Now they're considered conservative. They haven't changed.
Right. Glenn, in fact, Greenwald, I was just listening to him just a few weeks ago. He did a contributing piece on a network that I follow a lot. So, I mean, yeah, he's still liberal. And, you know, you can be liberal or independent, you know, and not have to favor one side over another. But unfortunately, this is all we've got to pick from. And that goes to my next question to you. A friend of mine asked me to ask you this, because again, it's kind of about judging and so on and so forth. But why is it that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the Constitution, 2/3 of the House has to vote on something in order to get it into law, and yet we go with 50+1?
You mean for constitutional amendments?
Yes.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it takes 3/4 of the states to amend the U.S. Constitution. So it has to go through either a constitutional convention called by the states, or it has to be passed through the House and the Senate, then it goes to the states. Here in the state of Missouri, they have attempted what is called IP reform, which is trying to make it so that it's not as easy. It's not the 50%+1 criteria in order to change the Constitution, because you and I both know 50%+1 of 10% of the people who vote means it's like 4.5% or 4.35%+1 of the total electorate of the state of Missouri. The legislature has attempted to, on numerous occasions, change or to solve this problem. There's so much bickering going on up there. You've got what's considered, we've got one person up in Jeff City that knows the Constitution. That man's name is Mike Moon.
Right.
He is the only individual up there who adamantly will follow the Constitution no matter what. Then you have a group of conservatives. I don't know what that means anymore. Conservatives means to conserve, if you look at the dictionary. But we continue to go left, 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 left. So what are they conserving? They're definitely not conserving anything that we were back when Calvin Coolidge was president. And then you've got a group, and I'm only talking to Republicans. Then you have a group who I believe that they love their own version of tyranny. They would rather see something like IP reform fail if it means that something that they wanted to get into law doesn't get heard. It's become a game. And for people to think that the Democrats and the Republicans, even up in Jeff City, are that far apart, two issues. I'm going to say abortion and gun rights are predominantly the two issues where they will sit on opposite ends of the political spectrum. Everything else, there's a big wishy-washy middle. IP reform needs to be done in a concurrent majority. What was attempted the last go-round in the state of Missouri was to make it so that the congressional districts, of which we have 8, that it had to pass in 5 congressional districts and have a 50%+1 majority in order to be approved. Well, congressional districts probably aren't the most beneficial. They ought to go state representative districts. There's 163 of those. You can't go counties, of which there's 114, because the county's population is not anywhere near equal.
Right.
Springfield has more people in the city limits of Springfield than probably about 30% of the counties in the state of Missouri. So you can't use counties. However, state representative districts are within 1 to 2% population base. So if you created an amendment, and they could have done this in Amendment 6, but they didn't. They could make it so that at any election that is the Constitution is being changed or amendments are being added, that it must pass either 3/4 or 2/3 of the state House districts at a 50% plus one rate in order to be put into the Constitution. There were, if I'm not mistaken, for medicinal marijuana, there were like 16 counties out of the 114 that was the plurality in order to get medicinal marijuana into the state Constitution.
It was only those 16 counties that made that big of a change.
Yeah. And I would expect it's probably, and I haven't done the legwork, but you can probably say maybe there was 20 of the 163 state representative House districts that are within that 16 county area. So you had 20, whatever the population of a state representative district is, telling the other 143 state representative districts that we're going to change the Constitution to this. Now, I'm all in favor of marijuana. I do not believe for a minute it belongs in the state Constitution. They could have went to the state law. They could have removed marijuana off of the medicinal schedules, and it would have made it legal just like that. But no, we have to do something stupid, because now when the federal government decides at some point that it's going to remove medicinal marijuana off of the schedules, we're stuck with the state Constitution and how it's regulated, how many plants you can have, the fines that are going to occur. We've tied ourselves into a mechanism where they would have to go and change the state Constitution to eliminate medicinal marijuana, to make it so that if the federal government just completely said, look, we're not going to criminalize marijuana at all, it's removed off the schedules. You can use it recreationally, you can use it medicinally, you can do with it whatever you want to do with it. We're going to have to change our Constitution to come in compliance with that.
Right.
So to answer the question, the game that goes on in Jefferson City is the reason why it is that we don't have a bill that was subject, with IP reform, and it's not codified in the Constitution.
You've said IP reform several times. IP standing for? Initiative
Petition.
Okay. I have been wanting to ask you that, and you finally just said it. And I was like, IP, I'm thinking IP addresses. Of course, I knew that wasn't the case for, the internet connection. But anyway, so
now
initiative petitions. Okay. And so what is it? A person, just in this case here, the state treasurer for Amendment 3, basically put this into effect on their own, is what you're saying?
Well, no, the Secretary of State did not do his due diligence to make sure that, granted, he checked all the signatures to make sure the signatures were valid.
Okay.
So in his opinion, it's certified to go on the ballot. What he did not do is to make sure that they followed the requirements that are required. No, I do not need to run for president, Don Corleone. Forget it. they need to make it so that anybody who goes into the office of SOS, which is Secretary of State, if you are not familiar with the initiative petition process, open up the Constitution and read it. Open up the law that are available to you to figure out what it is that's required in order to make it so that once the signatures are verified, did they or did they not follow the laws and the Constitution to allow that amendment to be on the ballot? And they did not. But he certified it. So you have an actor of government, ignored his oath, ignored his duty, certified Amendment 3, said it's good to go. Then it was litigated. There was a judicial opinion that was offered that said, but wait a minute, this can't go on the ballot because they didn't do this, they didn't do this, they didn't do this. I think in all sincerity, Justice Limbaugh wrote, and this is rare when this happens, he wrote an opinion that literally a sixth grader could understand. He laid it out perfectly.
I was going to say, that's awesome.
And
that
then,
really is.
Yeah, and then because of the deadline that was fast approaching, it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court goes, no, not so fast. We get to determine whether or not this goes on the ballot. And no, they did not say this, to my opinion, but they could go back and say the Secretary of State, who is an actor of government, approved this amendment and placed it on the ballot. It is our duty and our obligation now as the judicial branch to adhere to the individual who is in charge to make sure that everything was done copacetically. The judicial branch gives the legislative branch a huge chasm of leeway that it just drives me nuts. But let's talk Amendment 6.
Gotcha.
Amendment 6 specifically says, in order to ensure that all Missourians have access to the courts of justice as guaranteed by this Constitution, the administration of justice shall include the levying of cost and fees to support salaries and benefits for sheriffs, former sheriffs, prosecuting attorneys, former prosecuting attorneys, circuit attorneys, and former circuit attorneys. Now, the reason this one shows up on the ballot is because the term, in my opinion, administrator of justice. It goes back a long way where the administrator of justice is the person wearing the black robe. No one else that is mentioned in that diatribe of theirs is an administrator of justice. They are the administrators of peace, supposedly, if we go back to the colonial insurrectionist days.
Right.
So what they did is they passed a law saying exactly what this constitutional amendment says many, many, many years ago. Somebody sued and said, wait a minute, you can't do that because the administrator of justice isn't any of those people that you put into this category. And to the judge's credit, yes, I'm going to give him credit. I agreed with his opinion because here again, he wrote an opinion that is easily understandable by anybody with a sixth grade education. He says basically that the administration of justice, its well-known definition is the judicial branch. Everybody that you're trying to add into this does not fit into the administration of justice. And what also ends up happening is if they get to attach court fees and fines to pay for their retirement, which is what they're attempting to do, what happens to the tickets in a specific area if you're trying to build up your pension system? Hello, Ferguson.
Well, wouldn't that actually be a conflict of interest with the a sheriff's department? And I'm not so sure about the prosecuting attorney, but the sheriff's department would be more of the executive branch.
Well, the sheriff's department is a county position, not a state position. I mean, it's the people elect the sheriff. The sheriff then hires the people who are underneath him. Prosecutors are also generally elected. Circuit attorneys, I'm going to assume they're also elected, but they are not the administrators of justice. The administrators of justice is the judge. He is the one who is putting forth what it is that you'll end up having to pay, or what it is that will be part of your sentence for whatever law that you are in violation of. And there's another reason I hate this one too, is because the fact that, it's always said that we are a nation of laws, which I hate that terminology, because I can go through the revised statutes of Missouri and I can pick out about 90% of them that are absolutely, they have nothing to do with crime, because the victim is the state. The state can't be a victim. I mean, I had a buddy of mine who recently got involved in an auto accident. He was issued a citation for failure to yield. In January, he will have to go to court. And if they let's say they charge him $250, and then on that $250, you got court fees and you got assessments and this, that, and the other. So let's say he walks out the door for $300. Who's the victim?
The state in that case.
Does that $300 go to the woman who he broadsided when he pulled out from the stop sign and didn't see her there? No, it doesn't go to her.
No.
It goes to the court system. Mm-hmm. The court can't be a victim in this category. There's two people who are victims. Well, actually, there's one. There's the lady who was hit. Then you've got the perpetrator. That would be my friend who hit her. His insurance is going to make her as whole as possible. So the state then says, well, wait a minute, we have to get in on this too. So let's create a fine. Let's create the criminal intent of failure to yield. And if you're going to say it's to pay for the policing agencies and the ambulance and the fire truck that responded, those are already paid for through taxation.
Right.
So the court fee goes to the court. In which case, if there was no ticket written called failure to yield, there would be no reason for the court to exist in this case.
Be involved. Yep.
But that's the stupidity of our system.
Wow. You're making some very good points. You're that's one thing I really do. I really enjoy about you, Tom. You bring a lot of light in this case. And you're doing this very, very, very well in regards to breaking down what these different amendments are. We've got number 7 is next, and that has to do with voting, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Well, it was titled, this is the last one is the Amendment 6 was not initiative petition. It was created by the legislative branch. Amendment 7 is also created by the legislative branch. When it was titled, it was about elections. So what they're wanting to do is change all citizens can vote to only citizens can vote. To which, if you take the definition of a citizen, to my knowledge, there's only 2 types of citizens. There's the birthright citizen, there's the naturalized citizen. You don't get to proclaim you're a citizen simply by living here and paying taxes. So anytime any of these electoral boards at the county levels, at any state, decide that they're going to allow people to vote that are not citizens, birthright or naturalized, they are in violation of not only their state laws, but that 90% of them are also in violation of their state constitutions. Nobody gets held to account for that. Now, the second part of Amendment 7 is to make sure that ranked choice voting does not become the law of the land. So literally, when you go down to cast your ballot in an election, which I'm going to define election for you here in a minute too, because a lot of people are not aware of what an election is. But when you go down to vote, you only get to vote for one person. If there's 5 people on the ballot, you don't get to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then make it so that if one of those individuals does not have 50% of the vote, well, number 5 gets removed, and then we see if number 1, number 2, number 3, based on how it is that the ballots were numbered, if one of those people can go to 50%. How people understand that system, how people even deal with that system, is not something that I want to attempt. Amendment 7, the part that I have a huge issue with, and I will argue this up one side and down the other. They are discussing how it is that a political party nominee is chosen ballot-wise. That's not an election. It is a well-known, well-defined for years and years and years and years. An election is when you are casting a vote for somebody who may, if they are victorious, will sit at the seat of government. You're not doing that when you're voting for somebody in the political primary. You're voting for an individual who's going to go forward to the general ballot, which then becomes an election. A political party election, as they call it, is actually a nomination process. It's not an election. And the sheer fact that they're trying to put it under the terms of election, and because it was introduced by the legislature, they are in violation, in my opinion, of Article 3, Section 21 and Article 3, Section 23, that should not be on the ballot. I don't want to see political parties, it does not name them, but I don't want to see them in the state constitution. How a political party handles its business is the business of that political party. Political parties are private organizations. They're just like Apple, they're like IBM, they're like Anthem, they're like Chrysler, they're like any private corporation. Are we going to get to the point where we tell those individuals how it is that their voting must be done too?
We don't want that.
No. But yet we've got people who are supposedly, we have a bunch of people who are, they call themselves diehard constitutionalists. And Mike Moon has this little comment at times. He'll go, you know, if I'm making brownies and I sprinkle a little dog poop into the brownie mix, you don't know where I put it, but I sprinkle it in there. And then I go to feed you the brownie and I say, oh, by the way, I put a little dog poop in it. Are you going to eat it? Well, of course you're not. You don't know where the dog poop's at.
Right.
So basically, we're going to, because we want only citizens to vote, which I'm really not too sure that only and all makes that big of a difference, as long as we understand there's only 2 types of citizens: birthright and naturalized. Now, the founding fathers created something called natural born citizen. So even if you're birthright, you really don't qualify as a natural born citizen, because it all has to do with your parents and how they migrated over here and what happened before you were born. But you have birthright citizenship by the 14th Amendment, which it was also only dealing with slaves. It wasn't dealing with anyone else, but that's neither here nor there. And you have naturalized citizens. Those are the only two citizens that I'm aware of that you can have. So whether it's only or all really does not make that huge of a difference, in my opinion. Somebody can attempt to prove I'm wrong, but as long as we're talking the same language, citizenship is birthright and naturalized, there's no reason to change that terminology.
Correct. I just feel like, and I mean, and I know you know the heat, the temperature right now of the nation, not only in Missouri, but across the board. With all of the invading, illegal immigrant, alien people that have crossed our border. And I believe we're in agreement that should never have happened, should never have been allowed. There is a process, and we should have had them follow a particular process. Is this our attempt to maybe keep it to where it won't allow them to vote for the quote party that allowed them to come here criminally, or not?
Well, no, because it doesn't mention Republican or Democrat. However, in order to vote, you still have to be a naturalized citizen, or you have to have birthright citizenship. And the flood of aliens, or the flood of people that came up during the tenure of Kamala and Joe, they are not citizens.
Right.
So when somebody allows those people to cast a ballot in their name, they are in violation of state statute and state constitution. The problem is nothing happens to them.
Yeah. See, we got like 13 days to the election. And one side speaks of a lot of violence that's going to occur. And from what I can tell, I hear a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans, a lot of Christians saying, pray and it's in God's hands. And yet I listen to a lot of Democrats speak, and it sounds more of there's going to be a lot of riots. There's going to be a lot of tension. There's going to be a lot of ugliness in our society, which means that they're actually giving us a warning of what is going to happen if Trump were to be or gets elected. They're letting us know what they're going to do. And that's scary. That's not nice. That's not playing fairly either.
Well, they did it the first time, though. And then they used George Floyd as an excuse to do it the second time.
Right. And so in this particular case here, do you think it's going to be worse than what we experienced the first two times?
It depends on if the media publicly broadcast what is happening, and then try to promote what you see in front of your face isn't really what you see in front of your face. And don't forget, I sincerely believe on January 6th that was also orchestrated.
Right. And I do believe it was, when you've got Nancy Pelosi telling her daughter in a video that she's actually saying, honey, I should have had the National Guard. It was in my power. Really, January 6th was on me. And Mayor Bowser as well in Washington, when Trump had asked her for 10,000 troops. It's scary. I think that this is going to be I'm going to hope that it's going to be an amiable, accepting, let's move on and get the country back on track. But 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when we took out Osama bin Laden, there was a unified feeling in America.
Did we?
What's that?
Did we?
That's true. It's supposedly SEAL Team 6, I think it was. Yes.
Yeah, but they're
Supposedly.
dead.
Yeah. But you get what I'm saying. There was a lot of patriotism, though, at that time. Because we knew by getting rid of the terrorists, this guy here in particular, that was going to be the end of all hell. Now, you've got these 7 leaders that coming into the intro into the program here that have been assassinated, taken out, removed completely from the what I call the chess game of the world. You've got these 7 leaders, and yet you've got a lot of people in America that are supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and supporting the annihilation of the Jewish people of Israel. Where did our patriotism switch to where we're kind of supporting terrorists, for lack of better words? Because that's what it is.
You may not like my answer because it's going to go off in a direction that you may not be comfortable with.
Ooh, make me uncomfortable. Can't be any worse than the last time I took off with the aliens and they did an anal probe on me. I mean, and I survived. So come on.
For how long has this country and its government been manipulating elections, leadership, and conducting coups outside the boundaries of the states of the United States?
Okay, I'm with you.
Eventually, in my opinion, people are going to and have shown that they are fed up with, and I don't mean to term it this way, but it's the only way I can think of, the dictatorial authority of the United States over other countries. Part of the reason that we have Russia and Ukraine is because of our desire to get NATO closer and closer and closer to the Russian borders. Even though we promised that oath, we promised that we would not do that. And yet Poland's a NATO member. And then these other countries are a NATO member. There comes a point where if your neighbor's throwing trash in your yard, yeah, you may throw it back into their yard, but if they continue to throw it into your yard, you're going to walk next door and something is going to occur, which may end up with one of you two in jail. And I think in all sincerity, we have, as a country, we have manipulated enough people for often enough that the repercussions of what it is that we've done in the past, not only are they taking it out on us in certain circumstances, but they're also taking it out on our allies. And they feel justified. They don't see themselves as terrorists. They don't see themselves as insurrectionists. When we went into Afghanistan and we went into Iraq, you know, those people didn't see themselves as insurrectionists and they didn't see themselves as terrorists. They saw themselves as defending their home country. Just like I would hope that if somebody decided to invade the United States, that there would be a bunch of people who at that point would then be called by that country domestic terrorists and insurrectionists because they are trying to defend their homeland. We don't defend our homeland anymore. We defend everybody else's. And then we wonder why we get attacked. We get attacked because we've got our nose stuck in everybody else's business except for our own.
And we're more of a police state to those people because they expect us to help them govern. They expect us to help them help protect them as well.
Well, we come in, we create military bases.
Right.
So we militarily and self-defense wise, we make that country weak. Look at Germany. Look at Britain. Look at even Saudi Arabia now, and some of these other countries where, and yes, for you people who are listening, I did serve in the military. I'm not a traitor. I'm just pointing out the fact that we go in and we create a treaty of friendship and a treaty of defense, and we make these other countries militarily weak where they can't defend themselves. If we started pulling out, and no, not like we did in Afghanistan,
that was surrender.
But if we started to reallocate some of our resources back where it belongs, and basically told these countries, look, we're going to start exiting so you and your government can start defending your own country. But no, we've got the big bad wolf on the block is the United States. And these other countries see us as something to attack. Now, I honestly don't believe if Trump would have got reelected that Putin would have went into Ukraine.
No, I don't think so either.
But I also do not believe that Trump would have promoted the fact that we're going to put Ukraine under NATO. That was not supposed to happen. We have reneged on so many deals, and we wonder why it is that certain people and certain organizations, when they find it beneficial or they find a mechanism by which it is that they can attack us, that they attack us. We've got to start minding our own business, and we don't do that very well. And by we, I'm talking government, not the citizenry, because most of the citizens probably, you know, one of the things I keep hearing now that China, North Korea, Iran, and Russia are pretty much our enemies. How long have we created these countries to be enemies?
Right. We have molded them to be our enemies.
I mean, here we are. We're sitting with nuclear bombs. Russia's sitting with nuclear bombs, and yet we're telling other countries, "Don't you dare."
You're right.
We will annihilate you if you decide to take part in something to defend yourself. I mean, to my knowledge, Iran has not invaded any country. China has not invaded any country, at least in recent history. Russia has invaded Ukraine. But we've created a mechanism by which it is that we tell everybody else what they can and cannot do, and then we call them domestic terrorists when they decide to ignore us. We're not the parents of the globe, but we act like it.
And at the same time, every treaty that we seem to be involved with, somewhere along the line, seems to go sour, and we never hold up our end of. And that's been written in our history, for instance, with the Native Americans. They're told that they will get this, this, and this, and they don't get anything like what they were promised, per se. I mean, this has been going on for 200 years.
Oh, yeah.
America, has done this. So kind of interesting. I agree with you. I know you said you did. You called me off guard to looking at the bigger picture. But now I'm seeing the little picture even here. I see it better, put it like that. So, Tom, I greatly appreciate that. Did you want to cover this last amendment?
Well, the last amendment is actually Proposition A. It's a question.
Right.
This is the classic example of democracy in work right here. It will be the voters telling business owners how much it is and the benefits by which it is that they must pay their employees because the voters said so. And to my way of thinking, when I started my business, all these people who were trying to tell me what it is and how it is that an employee must be paid, I didn't see them put $1 in my hand to help me start my business.
Right.
Now, here they are going, well, we demand that you pay this individual this amount of money, And then if they work X amount of hours or you have X amount of employees, then they are required to earn paid time off based on how large or how small your company is. I mean, for people who don't, in my opinion, for people who don't understand economics, the minimum wage seems to be the ceiling for entry-level workers.
Hmm.
It's not the floor. It's the ceiling.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts that people seem to think that if they raise minimum wage to 17 and a quarter or $20 an hour, well, what about the people who right now can't live at $17.25 an hour? Why isn't it $20? Matter of fact, if $20 is real good, then why don't we make it $50? And if you like 50, well, then everyone would be able to survive if they made $100 an hour.
Right.
These arbitrary numbers that are just made up of nothingness. I am able to market and sell a product and get it into people's homes based on my output of what it is that I do on a daily basis. I don't have, I know I need to make a certain amount of money in profit to pay myself. But trust me, I'm not making minimum wage. I would actually, I think in all sincerity, I'd be getting a raise if I paid myself minimum wage. Because generally the small business owner doesn't make a lot of money until they start to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they get more people underneath them. Well, that's not for everybody.
Right.
I don't want a whole bunch of people that I'm responsible for. I like being the size that I am because it's easier to maintain. It's easier for me to control how it is that the business functions. Yeah, I could expand and get bigger and bigger and bigger. But then I think in all sincerity, the bigger you get, the worse your customer service gets. The bigger you get, the less control you have of the people who are in the field working for you. You've got higher insurance, you got workman's comp, you've got all these different costs and all these different areas by which you become a good boss. And I'll preface that by saying good. A good boss sees his position within the company as one that will make it so that his employees can afford not only to afford his product that he's selling or the service that he's providing, but will also be able to provide for themselves. It was never meant for a family of four to survive on the wage of a French fry cook at McDonald's.
Correct. No. Correct. You know, I know you'll agree with me on this. Growing up, because you and I we're close in age. We looked at a place like at McDonald's or a restaurant, a gas station, full service, by the way. That's what I worked. I don't know about you, but we looked at those positions as what would be called character building, the school of hard knocks, the ladder rung of, or the rungs of a ladder, working our way up to where, when we were of age, maybe married with children, that we actually do have a fairly secure position, maybe a unionized position, no longer the apprentice, but no longer an apprentice, but eventually, of course, a master. But you know, you just work your way up, and like you said, if the glass ceiling is $15, I mean, I have to tell you, $15 35 years ago was kind of a lot of money for me. 30 years ago, $15 an hour now would not. I mean, it just wouldn't do anything. It would not be able to. It just wouldn't be enough. And that's why people have to go out, have 2 jobs or even 3 jobs, 2 part-times and a full-time job. Or they have a double income coming in. Or eventually, in some cases, I remember a family, believe it or not, the son was actually making more money than the mother and father combined. But
Yeah,
that's because he went to college and,
But we've lost the. I mean, back in the 50s, generally, I know this is going to sound sexist, but generally the mother stayed home and raised the children.
breadwinners were males.
Right. The dad went out and worked, and on one job, they could afford a house payment, food, and a car payment.
Oh, you forgot. Also, usually a 1 week paid 1 week vacation because they had to pay for their vacations.
So it's not the fact that people aren't making enough money. The fact is that policies have devalued the dollar so badly that it's worth pennies now compared to what it was in the 50s.
A friend of mine had his son working for, boy, this is going to be hard to explain. A friend of mine asked for a mutual friend of ours' son to work with him. And he was going to pay the kid X amount of dollars an hour. I think it was $10. I'll go with $10 an hour. Well, as it turned out, the kid was there for like 6 hours, and he really paid the kid $20. And the kid was like, wait a minute, it was $10 an hour. He goes, yes. But you have to understand, 4 hours you stood around with your hands in your pocket. So what did I get for 6 hours with you? I got 2 hours of work. I got 4 hours of you playing pocket pool, for a lack of better phrase, I guess. So what now, was that boy's father upset that his son only made, say, $20 in 6 hours? Of course he was.
He shouldn't be.
But yes, he shouldn't be, because his father should turn around and say, you know what? You didn't assert yourself. You didn't have ambition. You showed no gotcha moments. Hey, you couldn't pull. I mean, I'm still helping. I'm still working. I'm still trying. And so when you're working with that kind of mindset of youth at this time in our across the board in our society, you're really struggling. I meet kids left and right. Initiative. Yeah, there you go. That's a good word. There's no self-initiative. They just, so I'm going to pay you what I think you're worth. You're not getting $60. You're going to make $20 because that's all you were capable of doing.
My last 2 years of high school, I had the opportunity to attend Franklin County Voc Tech, and I took Masonry classes. So in 11th grade, we would attend Votech for 3 weeks and attend school 3 weeks, and it would go back and forth. So you'd learn a skill, or you'd learn a trade. So they had auto body, they had mechanics, they had engineering, they had everything that you can possibly think of. It would be a micro dream. And during our senior year, one of the richest people in the area that I lived in decided that he was going to build a warehouse. He hired the kids from Votech. There was an agreement that was reached that for the 3 weeks that we were supposed to be attending Votech, we would drive to the job site. Now, he paid us minimum wage, a whole grand, $3.65.
Ooh.
I think minimum wage was $3.25 back then, so he paid us 40 cents more an hour. But we would go in, and instead of going to Votech, we would report to work, and we would work the same hours. Monday through Friday, we'd be laying brick, we'd be laying block, we'd be pouring foundations. And he had, basically, there was one individual who oversaw the project, but everything was built by student labor, basically, the whole entire warehouse. And then even after I graduated, the next few classes also got to do what it was that we were doing. So we were earning a weekly paycheck, $3.65 an hour, working 40 hours a week. Man, that was good money back then.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was making $3.25 an hour in the summertime being a lifeguard at the community pool.
Oh, lifeguards now. Oh, lifeguard. Do you know what a lifeguard makes out in California or New Jersey right now?
When I was stationed down in Florida at Fort Walton Beach, I was the lifeguard for the summer on Fort Walton Beach. And we were making at that point in time about $27 an hour. And that was in 1983, 84.
And I was just about ready to say they're pulling almost six figures.
Oh yeah, I've seen some of those guys that are in excess of $100,000.
And crazy.
But
don't get me wrong.
They'll tell you it's. I mean, they literally could die at any given point in time. They literally could die.
That is true, and you know that
It is.
Well. Yes.
But I could literally die walking out the front door of my house on any given day too, and I'm not.
You're not getting $100,000 to
No,
do
I'm
it.
not.
Oh, you know what? Now that we're laughing, I think we ought to leave that on a lifeguard joke. Do you have a lifeguard joke?
I don't. It's been so long since I've been a lifeguard. It's not even funny. I mean, I'm lucky if I can still swim 400 yards.
I've got a lifeguard joke.
Lay it on me.
So the lifeguard is sitting up in his little seat, and the women are just flocking over to him. So this guy
days.
Oh yeah. So and he's in a Speedo and so on and so forth. Anyway, the women are flocking on him. You know, he's got the abs, the whole 9 yards. So this guy's walking by and says, "Hey, what's your secret?" He looks around. He says, "I put a potato in my Speedo." So the guy next day comes to the beach. He's walking around. The women are laughing at him. He goes up to the lifeguard and says, "What am I doing wrong?" He said, "You put it in the front."
Oh my gosh.
I have them. I do have them. My son would say that's a dad joke, by the way. That's
there's actually a I think it's on Facebook. There's a whole thing called Dad's Jokes. and some of them just make me shake my head going, no, I'm a father and that would never come out of my mouth.
I don't know. I mean, I've been trying to turn the kid onto it, but he doesn't have quite the, I mean, when he says, put it like this, if he says that's a dad joke, I know it was a bomb. But if he says to me, "That was good," then I know it was a great joke. I know it's kind of odd, but his verbiage is what tells me. But so Tom, in closing, I always love having you come on. Kind of funny because I had my Constitution book, I had my paperwork, all my one-liners. I mean, I had it licked, and then you threw that curve. And it was really funny because I was upset about not being able to read in clarity on the common denominator Facebook page. Vote no. There was one that said, and on it said vote yes, and that was to the voting. It actually said vote yes. So it is our, and I think both of us agree that we don't want to vote yes on any of these amendments whatsoever.
No,
they're only going to hurt us.
I mean, it is, and I can say this proudly, it is the official position of the Locke and Smith Foundation and the membership of the Legislative Committee. We reviewed every single one of these amendments. We reviewed them for constitutionality, and the fact that you've got favoritism, you got set-asides, you've got language in there that makes it appear as if education is going. I mean, one of the gambling ones. It's payable towards early literacy reading programs, as long as it's done within the public education system. That's what the gambling one's for. But we've got to get away from trying to make it so that we amend the Constitution every time that we want something.
Yeah.
We've got to stop going to the government and asking for permission to do those things, which the government does not have any authority to do, because we did not grant it to them.
Yep.
Anyone who reads Article 1, Section 1, Article 1, Section 2, Article 1, Section 3, it clearly states that the people are the supreme authority of government. The fact of the matter is we've allowed government to get completely out of control.
Yes,
if people would pay more attention to their local government and they would pay more attention to their state government, it would not matter who occupies the Oval Office.
You're absolutely right. And you know, I've got a gentleman I'm working with here. I've always referred myself to Heath Gilbert of Cameron, Missouri. God bless you, Heath. You're a hero to me. And believe it or not, the man does know policy. He knows sunshine law requests. He knows that the dirty books are in the school. He knows that the police have the eunuch school resource officer has no general orders and the reason why I call him a eunuch is beholden to the quote superintendent, who is technically the chief of that little police department in that high school. They've got no general orders. And at the same time, this eunuch school resource officer, Johnny Palmer, by the way, I can say his name proudly, he won't do investigations the way he's supposed to by his oath. And really everything kind of seems to go to the oath of an elected official or the oath of a person that's placed into a position of. And when people don't follow what they're supposed to do, which is to serve, in this case, serve and protect both the parents and the teachers, and they're not doing their job, they need to go. And so right now, believe it or not, Heath is being labeled a sexual deviant because he wants to get the books out of the school. And everyone says, you're focused on just that. And he's like, no, I'm not just, I'm focused on many other things. The student handbook, the policies, the police, the porn book, a plethora of sunshine law requests. He's involved in it all. And he's beginning to get this negative, ugly, and don't get me wrong, I like hearing it. He likes hearing it in the long run because he can just look at them and say, sorry, but these are facts. And all you're doing is just sticks and stones. You're calling me names. But we have to, and my HOA. I don't know if I was able to tell you about the HOA, but 3 members stepped down earlier than the elected positions were supposed to be open and vacated. And 1 maintenance guy supposedly stepped down, was fired. And they've got 2 of those people, 4 people, possibly with criminal charges coming against the HOA, against them, because they technically, I believe, they've broken some laws that took money from the residents of our HOA. And for, of course, for the past year and a half, I've been the bad guy, you know, and that's the whole thing. You know, you've got to feel free to open your mouth and say, this is wrong. It's wrong here in my HOA. It's wrong here in my county. We don't want to do that, but we have to.
To my knowledge, there is not a public library or a school library where you can walk into and grab a Hustler magazine.
Correct.
But yet, for some reason, they'll forget about all those other books that have been taken off the shelves for one reason or another. And they concentrate on certain books that Johnny has two mummies, or, you know, I've seen some very graphic lesbian, gay, bisexual books that they say is age appropriate, but I'm not exactly sure a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old should be graphically reading what it's like for one boy to go down on another boy.
Correct. To be introduced to that lifestyle.
Right. I mean, it just for people to say, well, that's age appropriate. It's like, no. I mean, if you want to do that after the child is to the point of understanding better those types of things, maybe. But you can easily go down to Barnes and Noble and get those.
But don't you think that that should be the parents' responsibility for which to even introduce that to their child?
Well, I do, but
should be allowed to do that.
But that's why the parents are supposed to be controlling the school board.
And you know, that's the whole thing in a nutshell, Tom, because the past 2 years of me being involved at this point with all of this, I now realize there are some bad apples that we know, that we can identify, that are within the staff and teachers of the school district. But really, the biggest people that are the ones that are really not helping are the parents who are not involved at all and could care less. And that just blindly accept. A lot of parents, when they read it and see it, then they say, whoa, wait a minute. I could have had a V8. You know, they just whack themselves on the forehead. But seriously, the parents are not in, because I've been talking about this now for the past couple of weeks, actually, and I'm not afraid to say it again to you. If you could spend as a parent, if you and your wife, and I'm just throwing this at you directly, if you and your wife can spend 14 to 16 hours every month going to your son's football game for 3 months, why can't you or your wife find that and split up, by the way? Each of you go 1 month, rotate. Why can't you find that 2 hours, 2.5 hours max, to go to a school board meeting? And yet they pack the stadiums, and you're lucky if you can pack the room currently at this. In other words, you might get 30 people in there, and 15 of them are teachers. I'm exaggerating, by the way.
Well, luckily for us, we home educated. So we didn't have to attend school board meetings.
Okay, so you home educated. In your school district, did your kids want to play sports?
Well, at that point in time, the kids were pretty much there was this period of time where they were in the truck with me. So they were traveling the country. But then after we got out of the truck, yeah, we got them involved in like intramural sports, taekwondo, those types of things. But, you know,
that was 20 years ago, right?
Well, yeah, because my oldest just turned, let's see, he was born in 88. He just turned 37. I guess the youngest one's now 35. Man, I'm getting old. And you know, we got them involved in intramural activities. We got them involved in sports. But the school board was their mother and I.
Gotcha. I see. I
More
guess
her than me, but.
Well, I guess that's kind of a bad analogy. But today, you would think that they'd be able to at least split, you know, and say, you know what, we really should be a part of our child's education and see what these teachers are doing, if these things are in fact true or not. But, you know, it all starts in our own communities. I always thought DC was where you needed to make the change. Oh, yeah, there are changes that can be made in DC by contacting your senators and your Congress and so on and so forth. But it's really in your own community. Tom, if you like, I know I would like, you want to take us home on this one?
Well, one of the, I think in all sincerity, one of the things that most parents do, and I don't know if it's out of, if it's intended this way, but I think most of them see the public education system as basically their babysitter. They have determined that because they pay teachers and they pay the salaries and they pay the taxes, that whatever it is that the government determines that they should be being educated with, then that's the way it should be done. They're not going to challenge the system. And it really, realistically, it hasn't been until recently that this imaginary line has finally been crossed to where a certain percentage of parents went, whoa, wait a minute, you're teaching my kids what?
Yeah.
Why? What? I mean, that's not in keeping with my religious philosophy. That's not in keeping with, how it is that my children are to be raised. But your years and years and years and years of ignorance of allowing it to happen is causing the problems, and it's not going to flip overnight. You literally are going to have to start showing up to these meetings. You're going to have to take the arrows. You're going to have to, there are going to be people who are going to call you a domestic terrorist, and they're going to call you all kinds of names simply because you want to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute. That isn't the way that I would like to see for my children to be educated. And in reality, when you walk down the hallway and you pass a mirror, look in it and say, I'm the reason it's this way. Because you have allowed the system to get completely out of control. And now you're furious that the system's completely out of control. You caused it. Right. You weren't there. And the people who wanted to control the system, they kept running for the seats that were available so they could put their ideology to work. And then they slowly implemented what it was that they wanted to implement. I often say that, it doesn't matter whether you're team blue or team red. It always depends on what your ideology is. And if your ideology isn't in, being respectful, being a person who understands what another person's rights are, doing the things that are the difference between right and wrong. Wrong is you trying to convince my child who's a boy that he'd be better off being a girl.
Yep.
No, that's wrong.
100%.
But yet we've got people who see that as right. And you've allowed them on the school board. You've allowed them, not you personally, but you've allowed them to become school superintendents. Those are the people that go into the parameters of the education system because they know that's where they can control the students from, because we've given our children the directive to do what it is that the teacher tells you to do. Then the teacher says, don't take the stuff home, so the student doesn't take it home. So
and don't tell mommy and daddy.
Right. The parents then left in the blind. And then 3 or 4 years later, they go, well, when did this happen? Well, it happened when you weren't paying attention.
Yep. Well, Tom, I want to thank you very, very, very much for coming on. I really appreciated this closing, by the way, big time, because you did nip a lot of things comfortably. I look forward to another conversation with you, as always looking for one with you. And as soon as my attorney contacts me in reference to what's going on, hopefully I'll be reading a complete petition of motions to file in the courts against the state of Missouri, technically, against the county, against a newspaper, people, so on and so forth. I'm not going to stop my fight. I think people need to also realize that sometimes you just have to fight these battles, and you have to do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's a good thing to do. And it's not like something I chose, by the way, but they wanted me a contender. Well, they're realizing that I'm a heavyweight, that I'm not going to be easily thrown out of that boxing ring. So I want to thank you for your support, your knowledge, your guidance, your friendship. Your knowledge here, by the way, is always off the chain. And so again, I thank you very much for coming on, Tom. I mean that. Thank you.
You bet. Hang in there on your court case, because they absolutely, in listening to the podcast Institute for Justice has put out, and there's a couple different ones, they absolutely will try to wear you down, wear you out. And at some point in time, you're going to hear that word immunity pop up, because they use it quite regularly. And I think one of the things, stumbling upon this Institute for Justice podcast that I've been listening to for the past several weeks now, and seeing what it is that you've been going through and hearing what it is that you've been going through, it puts that in a whole completely different light. And I really do wish people would step outside their comfort zones and try to put themselves in another person's shoes. And you can easily do that by researching some of these different organizations that fight for your rights, to see how it is that government got completely out of control when they got completely out of control, because the people in the black robes decided, I like my version of tyranny, so I'm going to implement it.
Yep.
Through judicial decree.
Yes, sir.
But thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate
it. God bless you, Tom. I mean that. God bless you.
We'll
talk soon. Yes. I can't believe we actually spent 2.5 hours.
Oh, I can.
Yeah. And you know what? It's the best 2.5 hours I've spent all day long today. In fact, probably for the whole week.
And so remember, vote no on all the questions and the amendments.
In the state of Missouri, vote no on everything. Gotcha. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Have a good evening.
Peace. I'm very blessed to have some of the most wonderful people in my life. It takes time to meet people. It takes time to understand people. It takes time to learn people. I'm very blessed that I've had people that are much wiser, knowledgeable, people that have hearts. If you've looked at, if anything, if you have an opportunity, look quickly at, go back to Facebook, for the story. His background is exceptional, and knowing, and I forgot about, I forgot about how he homeschooled his kids on the road driving a truck. It wasn't so much that as it was, as we were saying, or that we got caught up to saying that, hey, we look at the system as, quotes, a babysitting system. We fully have entrusted and trust our teachers and staff members to do the right thing. And unfortunately, folks, here in Cameron, Missouri, they're making national attention. They're getting awards. They're getting to be placed on the watch list by the Turning Point USA. They had a wonderful write-up article in the Federalist back in, I believe it was in August. Just recently, we had Dr. Kelly Coles for Moms for America come here on her own dime. We had a young man, Alex Stone, who's the nephew or the grandson to Roger Stone, 20 years old. Very obviously a good Christian young man, molded for what he's doing now, which is podcasting The Alex Stone Show. And then, of course, Doug Billings was on. And if you go onto the common denominator, you can listen to everything from the speeches that they made. You can listen to Doug Billings as he's the disruptor. I kind of liken to say about Doug. If I was a cartoon illustrator, if I could put a can of Raid on the screen and put his head on top of that Raid and opening his mouth as if he's talking with a little caption, I'm Doug Billings with the Right Side Podcast with Doug Billings, and then watch all the roaches because that's what I would put in the background. All the roaches that he's talking to, and put the heads on, the different roaches of each of the school board members, because that's what they are right now, in my opinion. They're cockroaches. She gavelled down, they scattered, they disappeared. And then, of course, then they go into, quote, I guess they went into another closed session, which was another violation of the Sunshine Law, meaning that going into a closed session at that point was not on the agenda. And so you've got to understand, folks, it takes a whole village. It takes a village. And right now we've got a big election coming up. Voting's very important. It's the biggest stress. I think 7 out of 10 people are stressed out. All I know is I hope that you're going to vote from your heart. I hope you're going to vote with the guidance of God and Jesus in your life. And more than anything, I'm going to hope that you're going to vote for your fellow man and woman here in America, because some of them may not be voting the right way because they've taken that Tide Pod blue pill. They've just focused in on that hatred and on that evil. And until it goes one way or the other, and I'm just going to pray that my president, Donald Trump, gets put into office again. In the meantime, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for coming on and watching. And just know there's a reason why all of this is happening. And maybe it's because America needs to have a new awakening from being woke, but a new awakening of just how blessed we all are. See you next week. Amen.